Okay, so again, we are talking about hoop earrings. And I've got 3 different styles to show you today. And the first one I'm going to make using the Tierra Cast hoops. These come in a couple different sizes. The ones that I'm using here are the larger ones. And I've got some seed beads here. I've got a clay coated, I think it's an 8mm round. And I've also got one of those little new brass spacers here, and I've already sort of pre-connected using head pins and an eye pin, a little seed bead, and I've got it dangled to the bottom of the little clay cult and the little metal bead thing. So, all right, so here we go. And I've got, most importantly here, some 26 gauge wire. And so what I am going to do to start with is, of course, take my wire, and I've got probably about 2 feet here. Should be enough, okay? And of course, I'm going to condition it because we always have to do that every time we pick up a piece of wire. There we go. Okay, and I am going to put on my glasses. There. All right, so I'm going to start by wrapping one end of this wire through the hoop. And to do that, I usually can I'm holding the wire and I've got a little tail sticking down here, and I'm pressing pretty hard so the wire doesn't slip while I'm doing it. And I'm just going to run it through the hoop about, let's just start with 5 times. 2, 3, 4, and I've got to get that little tail out of the way, and 5, and then I'm going to use my fingernail, and that really is the best choice to kind of just smush these loops up together here. I'm going to bring this up to the camera. It will go out of focus for a minute so that you can see the coils. I really want to get those pretty nicely snug together. All right, so now I'm going to start adding some beads here, and I think I'm going to go ahead and put that tail up to the top. And I'm not going to cut this tail off right now because I am going to use it to kind of make sure that my coil doesn't spin while I'm doing this. So I managed to get a little kink in my wire, not a problem. Just going to undo that and get that fixed. So I'm going to add a bead, and here we go. There we go. Okay, get that bead on there. Okay, here we go. So, and I want the bead to kind of stand up on its side like this. So I'm going to sort of put it where I want it to sit, like that. There we go. And bring the wire. The wire was coming from the back, so I'm going to continue to wrap it from the front to the back. 1, 2, 3 wraps there, and there's the bead. I had to kind of hold on to that while I was wrapping it. Let's do another one, get it on there. Okay. Okay, and again, I'm going to want the bead to just sort of, I'm going to position it so it's just nicely standing up there. Okay, there we go. And you notice the beads are just going to be slightly slanted. That's okay. You know, again, they're going to be consistent. And I do have to hold on to the beads between wraps. 1, 2, is that 3? Yes, it is. There we go. Okay, I'm going to add another bead. And I may not go all the way through this, but I do want to show you how to make the little loop in the center that we use to connect our little clay cult dangle there. There it is again. 1, 2, 3. Okay. All right. Hello, Pammy. How are you today? I'm so happy that you are here. Okay, here we go. And Joanne is saying thank you for sharing your knowledge. I wish I had enough knowledge to really feel good about sharing, but man, I just love to be able to at least share my enthusiasm for all of this. So there's the fourth one, and I'm going to go to 5, and then I'm going to make my little center loop. Okay, get that bead on there. Here we go, and get that positioned. So, and the key is to just keep, you know, pretty good tension on the wire as you're wrapping it, and to keep those little coils close together. So I've got 5 beads, and you can see I'm way off to the side. We don't care. So I've got 3 coils. Now I'm going to add, I want to make a loop. And so what I'm going to do, I've got a piece of, believe it or not, 16 gauge wire here. Probably 18 would work just fine too. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sort of hold it up against the ring like this and just continue to wrap around both the little piece of 16 gauge wire as well as the hoop. And then I'm going to, if you can see, I'm going to come underneath the wire, and one would think that maybe as soon as I form that little loop I could pull the wire out, but the 26 gauge wire is pretty fine, and if I pull it out before I've kind of anchored it on the other side, I'm going to just distort my loop. So there is, then I can pull the wire out, and I have formed, see if I can put it up beneath my hand. I'm going to bring it up to the camera and see if that will, not really doing it for us. Okay, I've got a little loop there. Okay, so now I would just continue to add beads on the other side. Okay, and I'm just going to add one more, and then I'm going to stop. Okay, and there we go. 1, 2, 3. There we go. Okay, and then when I finish all my wrapping and I have all my beads, you notice I can just slide this around any way I want so I can get that loop. And you can see there's at least a little gap there right on the right down the middle of the, and then I would just take my chain nose pliers, and I've got this loop on top of the bead already open here, and let's see, and I'm going to just insert it, and sometimes this takes just a little bit of maneuvering because the bead is almost, you know, as it's kind of, I got this big bulky bead up near the top, but it will go. There we go. Let's just going to spread that apart for just a second. There, nope, almost. Well, of course, something's gonna be problematic today. There we go, got it. So I've got that through there. I just use my chain nose pliers to close that loop, and there's my dangle component on that earring. So really nice little design. You can bring beads all the way up if you want, just as far up as you want, and you can sort of adjust these. This works with a bunch of different types of hoops and loops, and of course you can make your own. Then to finish this, what I'll do is use my flesh cutters. Here we go. Okay, and I'm going to get right down to the tip. I'm cutting this wire off as close as I can to the hoop. There it goes. And then I'm just going to use my chain nose pliers to kind of press that in, so I've got a nice clean finish on that. All right, so there's the hoop earrings using the Tierra Cast hoops. These are the bigger ones. Tierra Cast makes a smaller size too. They come in gold as well. And so these are nice, really nice little components, and the little wrap at the top makes them, I mean, the wire is probably a 12 gauge, really thick. And they're, of course, really sturdy, so they're not going to get bent or anything like that. So there is that project. Okay, set that aside. And I have another project here using the new little designer designer loops that Antelope Beads is carrying. I think I mentioned last week that I love these little components. They are so cute. I love the little bit of a satin silver finish and just lots of different styles. I think we used some of those last week. And so what I've got here is an assortment of seed beads, and then I've got one Clay River little pony bead. It's the coppery brown, and I'm using a couple of different colors of seed beads on this one. So, and again, I've got a piece of 26 gauge wire, and I am going to condition it. I'm going to get this out of the way. There we go. Okay. And with this one, I like to start kind of towards the middle. So I am sort of, and then I'll work up to each side. So it looks like I've got some brown beads towards the middle. So let's start with a brown bead. So put a brown bead on the wire. I'm going to add the ring here. And then I am going to, I'm going to actually go back through the bead, okay, just like that, kind of keeping that centered, and it's only so I have a good amount of wire on each side. There we go. And so what I've done is I've got the little wire loop around the ring, and I've got the bead on here, and then I'll just start by pulling this wire out to the side there, okay. And now this is, believe it or not, this is a really pretty standard seed bead technique that we do with thread and needle, but we are using wire, and that does a couple of things. It makes it, first of all, waterproof, and sometimes you don't have to worry about your thread breaking and all that kind of stuff. And secondly, it adds a nice little silver touch to the outside instead of seeing some kind of thread. So I'm just going to do that again in slow motion here. So I add a bead, I come through the hoop, okay, and I'm going to then go back through the bead, okay, and then I'm just really snugging the wire down. There we go. So I've literally got some little wire stitches on top of this. Okay, so I've got 3 brown ones. Now I'll go ahead and add a green one. So I add a bead, go through the hoop. And one of the things with the wire is I do want to kind of make sure that I'm not leaving a huge gap here. You know, this is wire, not thread. So, you know, if I get a big, ugly loop, it's a little harder to pull it through. But the 26 gauge wire is malleable enough so that it really pretty well acts like thread, and the stitching on this is pretty even, and yet it doesn't just break when you pull it. I've tried this with some finer gauge wires, and sometimes you do run into the wire breaking, which is super annoying. There's the bead. I've got it just pretty close to the other one. There we go. And so I would just continue to work that up this side. Then to add the clay cult bead, and you notice this one's, the other beads are sitting sort of on top of the ring. The clay cult bead is sitting more like the first project we did where they're kind of sitting up on their side. So, but all I have to do here is just string on the clay cult bead, and then I will add another seed bead. There we go. And then I just start to weave up the other side. Okay, there we go. So I've got, so I'm going to go back through the seed bead, but not the clay cult bead. Okay, there we go. Okay, and so I've got that bead now kind of hanging down there, and I can kind of adjust that however I want. And so I'm just going to put one more bead on this project. There we go. Okay, so whoops, that's not the bead I want. There we go. There's another brown bead. So string it on, come through the hoop, back through the bead, pull it tight. Okay, and that one almost got a big hump in it, but okay. So, and again, this takes just a little practice to get your stitches nice and even, but it just really makes a nice design. So here's the finished earring for that particular one. And you can do this. We're going to talk in just a second about making your own hoops. You can make your own hoops. You could do this with the Tiara cast hoops. And then, of course, because I love these new components, I made a little one here. I used some sea glass rondelles, and I used some of the little tiny balls. And I could have gone all the way up, but I thought it looked kind of good to just have it hanging down here. And so what I did, and I will, okay, I'm going to sacrifice this one. I'm going to cut this apart. No big deal. Okay, if I wanted to add this little ball to my earring, I would string it on, and then I will add my bead just as before. And I'm really going to go through the same process. The only thing I'm going to do is kind of just fiddle a little bit. Let's get this guy up here. Okay, I'm going to do, so there I've got that, and I'm just going to fiddle, make sure that the dangle is just got a little extra loop there. So I'm just really just adding it right to the wire as I weave, and just by making sure, I just want to make sure that it's loose enough so that it moves, because there's no point in having dangles if they don't move. All right, so that's project number 2. And in project number 3, I am actually going to make my own hoop. Here we go. Okay, and this is easy to do. I'm using some 18 gauge gold wire, and the Antelope Beads has the 26 in silver, but I'm going to go ahead and use the 24 in gold for this project. So a couple of skills here. We're going to really learn to make some tight coils, and then we're actually going to make our own kind of chandelier component out of wire here. So I'm going to start with about, I guess I got about 6 inches of 18 gauge. Again, I'm going to condition it, okay? And then I'm going to cut, and I'm going to cut a pretty nice loop piece of this 18 gauge. I just don't want to run out, so I'm going to start with a solid, well, I would have liked to start with a little bit more, but my wire came apart, so I'm starting with about 2.5 feet, and let's see where that gets us. So I'm going to condition this wire, and I'm going to start to coil. Okay, so to start a coil, I'm going to do the same thing I did with the hoop. I am got a little tail sticking up there, and I'm really kind of snugging down on everything as I make that first wrap. Okay, there we go. And again, I really got to keep, and you notice I can kind of move this coil up and down. I am going to sort of keep that tail, not going to cut it because it's going to give me something to hold on to so my coil does not spin around as I'm trying to coil. And so I'm going to wrap this, and I counted ahead of time. I'm going to wrap it 40 times. So, and you notice that when I come up, I've got a good tension here, and I am almost coming on top of the previous coil and just letting it almost just sort of fall off the edge, because I want it to be very, very snug. So that's 5, let's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. Got a little gap there. I can usually get that pretty well mushed back together. And this again will take a little practice, but it is worth it, because a coil is a great embellishment for all kinds of things. That was 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 38, 39, 40. There we go. There we go. Okay, so now I want to make these loops. So I'm going to do the same thing I did with the other one. And I will point out that this, what I'm going to do right now, is almost impossible to do with a preformed hoop. You really need to start with a flat piece of wire to do this. So, and I'm going to put my little 16 gauge piece of wire right there, okay? And I'm going to wrap around this, and then I'm going to wrap 5 times. 1. And you notice I'm coming between the silver wire and the gold wire. 2. I've got 1 wrap on top to form my loop. 3. Okay, and this is where you really just cannot care about your fingernails. 3, 4. Okay, and really want to make sure that's 5. This just takes a little bit longer to do. 5. Okay, and I've got 5 actually with that one. So bring that wire up over the top again. So I've got a second loop. Okay, okay. For those of you that do a lot of wire work, this is sort of one of the basket weave techniques that's out there. Really, really attractive way to do some wire work. At some point we can maybe look at doing something like that. 3, that looks like 4. This is 5 coming. That was 5. Okay, here we go. Come up. Okay, there's my third loop. Okay, and then I'm going to do that 2 more times. 1. So I'm just really pushing that up every time. 2, 3. Okay, 4, and this is 24 gauge wire, and 5, and then the 1 more. There we go. And then 1 more loop. Then 1, 2, and what I did was I kind of fiddled around with a number of wraps between each loop, so that the loops would be spaced appropriately. 4, 5. There we go. And then I just need to at least start a couple wraps on the other side to anchor that loop in. 1, 2, 3. Okay. And that should do it. Okay, 3. And so now I can just pull this wire out. Looks like I'm going to need some pliers to help me with that. There we go. And I have got 5 loops. They're all exactly the same. They're all evenly spaced. Okay, so then I'm going to just finish my wraps on the other side. I'm going to do that really fast. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 27, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40. There we go. Okay, so there's my base component. So I'm going to go ahead right at this point, and I am going to cut off these little tails using those flush cutters. And these flush cutters that Antelope Beads carries really work well with wire. I think I mentioned before, do not use them with the stainless steel beading wire, but man, they're great, very nice cutters that are really not too expensive. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and just use my chain nose pliers and press that little tail in. Okay, okay, and I'm ready to form a loop. Okay, so you can form a loop around just about anything. Pill bottles, little tiny bottles, tubes, anything you have. I've got this really cool Disney pen here, which would make a great mandrel. So you can just use anything. If you have a ring mandrel, that's just a really nice handy tool to form loops with. So I'm going to set that up here. Okay, and so if I know, for instance, that I want I'm going to stop for just a second. Let's pretend I'm going to start from scratch. Say I want a loop that's going to go around a pill bottle, and I know this is my crossing point. What I would do right here is I would take a Sharpie and mark that point, because I know then that my coil has to just go up to those two marked points. So if you're using something that you can't adjust the size on, like a pill bottle or whatever, then, you know, sort of pre-size, you know, figure out how long that your wrapping is going to be. So in this case, though, I have a ring mandrel, but I am going to kind of pre-form this loop. Here we go, just using my hands. Okay, and it's oval at this point. I don't really care. Okay, there we go. This is what I've got so far. And then I'm going to take one side and I am going to bring it straight up. Okay, I just bent it straight up. And then I'm going to take the other side and I am going to wrap it around the first side. 1, 2, 3 wraps. There we go. Now I'm going to mention that I can do this technique using a thinner wire, a 22 gauge, even a 24 gauge. If I'm using, I know that this wire is thick enough that if I form my little loop at the top for the earring, I know it's not going to come apart. If I'm using a finer wire, what I'm going to do actually is get my round nose pliers. I'm going to form a loop like this, bend it down, bring it around, rotate my pliers, actually get them all the way to the other side here, and I'm going to form something that looks like this, and then I am going to wrap around that. That will make sure that that loop's not going to pull apart. But for this particular piece, I don't need to worry about that, because I know when I form a loop at the top, it is not going to come apart. So I will go ahead and cut the piece of wire that I wrapped with off. Now I'm going to do something that seems like it's kind of pointless right now, but I am going to go ahead and turn that other wire to the side. The reason why I'm doing that is I'm going to run this up the ring mandrel, and I'm going to really push it up as far as it will go, okay, to make it round. And if I didn't put that little kink there, the chances are it's just going to kind of start to pull apart. So by putting that little kink there right at the beginning, I make sure that that's not going to happen. So there we go. That looks pretty good. Sometimes right at the top, I need to sort of play with it a little bit. There we go. And then when I take that off, I've got a round hoop. There we go. And sometimes, you know, I'm just going to need to maybe adjust it a little bit. That part at the top doesn't want to quite go round by itself. I might have to just adjust it a little bit. I think that looks pretty good. So then I'm going to go ahead and form a little loop at the top. So I'll cut this wire off to about 3/8 of an inch. And I am going to, I pulled it to one side already. And so now I'm just going to roll it to the other side and form a little loop right there. So there's my little earring component. And then I've got these little seed beads already put on head pins, and I formed little loops at the top. And so I can just use my chain nose pliers and add those to my loops. And I've made my own little hoop chandelier component, and this really does not take too long to do, and it's just really nice. And again, if you want a piece with all those loops, it's really hard to do with a preformed hoop. You're really better off starting with a piece of bare wire. There, whoa, that one just broke off on me, and that's just the way it goes. Okay, that's because I've put those together and taken them apart way too many times to kind of figure out what spacing I needed for my loops. But there we go. Okay, so I just continue to add those And when I finish, this is what I've got here. Okay. And again, this would work. This works with the seed beads. It works with sea glass. I could have put a clay coat bead on the bottom. I could have added a charm. All kinds of great options for this design.